At the beginning of March, I had a feeding tube placed into my small intestines in an effort to receive nutrition. I have chronic pancreatitis, which has been flaring up. Eating food makes my pancreas angry and causes it to erupt in pain. It was hoped placing a feeding tube distal to my pancreas would avoid aggravating my pancreas. Unfortunately, after I had the feeding tube placed, my GI tract became a mess. I was now in constant severe pain. My intestines frequently spasmed and I lost the ability to eat solid food. I had to puree all food, but even pureed food caused severe pain. I continued to lose weight and became malnourished. I was admitted to the hospital and started on IV nutrition called TPN. But now, a big question loomed. What should I do with the feeding tube? If I'm not using it, why do I still have it? After having a bowel obstruction and spending several days in the hospital, I had a follow-up appointment with my primary care doctor. She told me I should have the feeding tube removed, but she did not give me any guidance on who should remove the tube. Through a series of answered prayers and a miracle, I was able to get an appointment to see the surgeon who placed the J-tube. I eagerly waited several days for the appointment, hoping, wishing, and praying the surgeon would agree to remove the feeding tube. When I have my appointment with the surgeon, I am surprised he is on board with me getting TPN for my nutritional needs. I thought he would insist I continue to try to use the feeding tube, but instead, he tells me I need to gain weight and TPN is an excellent choice. I asked the doctor what I should do about the feeding tube. I believe he will inform me I need to schedule another surgery and endure another procedure. But to my shock, he tells me the feeding tube can be pulled out in the office. The feeding tube has a balloon on it. You can take a syringe, deflate the balloon, and then you can pull out the feeding tube. I am stunned as the surgeon tells me this. My last J-tube required 2 procedures to get the feeding tube removed and to repair the damage the feeding tube did to my intestines. But now, I am told this feeding tube can be taken out with just the use of a syringe. I am nearly leaping for joy. Oh, how wonderful. I can hardly contain my excitement. A syringe is attached to the end of the feeding tube to the outlet which has the letters BAL printed on it, which stands for balloon. The syringe is pulled back. 2 milliliters of water are withdrawn. The feeding tube is then pulled out. The feeding tube gets stuck for a brief moment and pain shoots through my abdomen. But after applying a little bit more pressure, the feeding tube breaks free and continues on its way out of my body. I believe as soon as the balloon to the feeding tube is pulled out, that should be the end of the feeding tube. But instead, the feeding tube continues. I am shocked to see the length of the feeding tube. It goes on and on and on and on and on. This is the length of the feeding tube that was left inside my intestines. No wonder food kept getting stuck in my intestines. This long feeding tube tail was fighting with food for room in my intestines. I instantly knew why I was having so many issues eating. I also wondered if the feeding tube tail caused my recent bowel obstruction. Once the feeding tube was removed, the tremendous abdominal pain I've been having since the feeding tube was placed was instantly gone. The intense abdominal muscle spasming also significantly lessened. I was over the moon excited for this dramatic reduction in symptoms. Over the next 24 hours, the feeding tube pain and spasming lessened to almost zero. I could not believe the feeding tube was causing so many issues, but I was also thankful and grateful the feeding tube was now out of my body. Over the next several days, my ability to eat solid foods improved and my appetite returned. Now, I can again eat by mouth solid foods, but now I'm eating enough to aggravate my pancreas. I am thankful I'm still on TPN because my pancreas flare-ups have been much more painful and dramatic than what they were before getting the feeding tube. Hopefully, in the days and weeks to come, my intestines will heal from any damage done to them by the feeding tube. I am grateful my doctor tried using a feeding tube to support my nutritional needs, but for the moment, it seems as though I will continue with TPN and eating as much as I can by mouth to gain weight. The future of what should be done about my pancreas issues remains unknown for the moment. I have an appointment with my GI doctor at the end of May. I am praying he agrees to allow me to continue with TPN, and am praying he will be able to provide access to pain medicine for pain control when I have pancreas attacks. Thank you so much for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe down below. I hope you have a great day and a wonderful week. Bye-bye.